Amen. This morning, I want to encourage you, if you haven't done so already, check in on Facebook at Being Church FL. And make sure, because today, every time you check in, for every check-in during the month of July, a family will receive clean drinking water in Northwest Haiti Christian Fund. A family of Haitians will receive clean drinking water for a week. All you have to do is check in right now, and a family that's struggling will get clean water for a week. So I hope that you will take advantage of that easy opportunity. Even those who may be just watching online, you can check in with us and still be able to be a blessing to others. So, we're in Jeremiah. We've been reading through the Bible, reading all the way through the Bible together this year. Here we are, halfway through the year, and we are in Jeremiah. This is our second week there. Jeremiah was a prophet to the nation of Israel and Judah, went back in the last few decades of their existence as a kingdom of their own. And last week we saw how they were struggling to determine who to listen to. And how do you know it's from God? How did they know whether what Jeremiah was saying was true, which was that God had already decided that the empire of Babylon was going to come and take over Judah because of their unfaithfulness to God, or to listen to the false prophets. We actually saw that there was 3 different sets of voices that we should avoid listening to, whether it was for the people in Judah or for us, even in our own lives. We saw that we should avoid the lies of false prophets, and that we should avoid the corruption of kings and politicians who want to tell us just what we want to hear, and avoid the lunacy of listening to our own hearts apart from God. Because the Bible says that our hearts are desperately wicked above all things. And so this idea that we hear so much, just listen to your heart and go with your heart. If your heart is not in line with God, which the Bible says it's not, unless you have put your trust in Him or seeking to follow Him, then it's only going to get you into trouble. Any of those false voices can lead to serious trouble. So what we concluded then last week was, when it's God speaking, it is always going to agree with His written word that we have in the Bible. He's never going to contradict Himself. He's never going to disagree with what He has written and had written and presented down to us and has been passed down to us in the Bible through the centuries. And the second thing we saw is it's always going to glorify God. It's always going to lift Him up. It may be something hard for us, but ultimately the point is to glorify God. And when God is glorified, ultimately everybody else is going to be more blessed because of it. But this week now, as we have read further in Jeremiah, if you've been keeping up with reading, then we finished Jeremiah yesterday. We started Lamentations today, but we're finishing up with Jeremiah. And we come across another really complex question. Okay, so we say, we kind of determine, how do you know if it's God speaking or if it's just somebody else or something you want to be happy. But then there's this second question. Why don't people, including us, listen to God when He does speak? Why don't we just say, oh, God, I know this is you. I'm going to listen and I'm going to do exactly what you want me to do. Because let's be honest, we don't always do that, do we? So let me give you a little bit of background here of where we're going to be. If you've got a Bible, you can go ahead and turn to Jeremiah chapter 42. That's where we're going to be getting started, or whatever device you may be using. Jeremiah chapter 42. So here's what's happened. At this point, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon has come. They have laid siege to the city of Jerusalem for about 1.5 or 2 years, where Zedekiah was the king. And he'd been set up as a puppet king underneath Nebuchadnezzar's rule, but he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. So the Babylonians came, they besieged Jerusalem, and about 1.5 to 2 years in, there was a point where there was no food, there was no other choice. So King Zedekiah and his entourage made a break for it. They made a hole in the wall and they took off trying to escape. Ultimately, they were caught, tracked down and caught. Zedekiah's sons were killed right in front of his eyes, and then his eyes were gouged out. So the last thing he ever saw was his sons being killed. And then he was taken away prisoner to Babylon, where he lived in prison the rest of his days. And also with him, there were a number of others who were taken. So what's left in Jerusalem is not a lot of people. Just a handful of people. But Jeremiah was one of them. Jeremiah was treated well because word had gotten to the Babylonians that Jeremiah told the people and the king that they should just go ahead and surrender to King Nebuchadnezzar and that God would take care of them. That things would be better to surrender to the king than to try to rebel against him. So they had heard this and they made provisions for Jeremiah to be taken care of. He's an older man by now. And they made provisions. There was a governor set up by the name of Gedaliah. And the Babylonians said, you just go and stay. You're under his protection and he's under our protection. He will take care of you. But not long after that, Gedaliah was assassinated by some Jewish zealots who did not want him ruling over them. And so now they're in a really predicament because they knew that King Nebuchadnezzar was not going to be happy about that. And there were some military leaders who had been in outposts around the country, who come back now and say, and they come to Jeremiah and say, what do we do now? Because as military leaders, we already, we had escaped, but we know the king's probably not happy with us. But now that his governor has been assassinated, we know he's going to be angry. What do we do? And so we come to Jeremiah chapter 42, verse 1, and we see the remnant of God's people seeking God's will. Listen to what it says. All right, we're going to read a lot of scripture today, so just listen to what it says. Then all the commanders of the forces, and Johanan the son of Kareah, and Jezaniah the son of Hoshaiah, and all the people from the least to the greatest came near and said to Jeremiah the prophet, let our plea for mercy come before you, and pray to the Lord your God for us, for all this remnant, because we are left with but a few, as your eye sees us, that the Lord your God may show us the way we should go, and the thing that we should do. Jeremiah the prophet said to them, I have heard you. Behold, I will pray to the Lord your God according to your request, and whatever the Lord answers you, I will tell you. I will keep nothing back from you. Then they said to Jeremiah, listen to this, may the Lord be a true and faithful witness against us if we do not act according to all the word with which the Lord your God sends you to us. Whether it is good or bad, we will obey the voice of the Lord our God to whom we are sending you, that it may be well with us when we obey the voice of the Lord our God. All right, so let's stop there and talk about this for a moment. So is this a good thing or a bad thing that's going on right now as the people come to Jeremiah with this request?
Good thing.
It's a good thing, right? What all do you see there that they did that was right? That was the right way to react where you're in a desperate situation and you need to know what God wants you to do.
The fact that they're actually seeking His word in the first place is a far cry from where they were earlier
Absolutely.
on.
The fact that they were actually wanting to know what God said instead of just doing what they had been doing for years and years before that is good. What else did they do that you see that did right there?
Trust Him, trust the Lord.
They were trusting Him, right? And how do we know they were trusting? What did they say that shows us that they were trusting?
They made a commitment to obey whatever He said.
Absolutely. They said, whatever He says, good or bad, we will do it. We're going to do it no matter what. And they said, even if it's bad, we're going to do it. Because we're going to trust that God is a faithful witness. And that God is, and they said, look, let Him treat us. Let Him wipe us out if we don't do what He tells us to do. So, right, they came, they asked, they trusted, they pledged obedience. So what happens next? Look at verse 7. It It's going to be kind of a long read, so hang in there with me, okay? Because I don't want you to miss some of this stuff. At the end of 10 days, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah. Okay, so Jeremiah, for 10 days, he's praying, seeking God's will on behalf of the remnant of Judah. Verse 8. Then he summoned Johanan the son of Kareah and all the commanders of the forces who were with him, and all the people from the least to the greatest, and said to them, Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, to whom you sent me to present your plea for mercy before him. Verse 10. If you will remain in this land, then I will build you up and not pull you down. I will plant you and not pluck you up. Let me just stop right there, because Jeremiah had been prophesying for decades. That's what's going to happen. God was going to tear them down rather than build them up. He was going to pluck them up rather than plant them. Okay? And he's saying, nope, I'm going to change all that. Why? For I relent of the disaster that I did to you. Verse 11. Do not fear the king of Babylon, of whom you are afraid. Do not fear him, declares the Lord. For I am with you to save you and to deliver you from his hand. I will grant you mercy, that he may have mercy on you, and let you remain in your land. So, good news here, right? Clear word, good news, but listen to verse 13. But if you say, we will not remain in this land, disobeying the voice of the Lord your God, and saying, no, we will go to the land of Egypt, where we shall not see war or hear the sound of the trumpet or be hungry for bread, and we will dwell there, then hear the word of the Lord, O remnant of Judah. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel. If you set your faces to enter Egypt and go to live there, then the sword that you fear shall overtake you there in the land of Egypt. And the famine of which you are afraid shall follow close after you to Egypt, and there you shall die. All the men who set their faces to go to Egypt to live there shall die by the sword, by famine, and by pestilence. They shall have no remnant or survivor from the disaster that I will bring upon them. Okay, so what's God's initial answer? They said, Jeremiah, go seek God for us. Find out, what are we supposed to do in this desperate situation? What does God tell them to do? Stay put, right? Stay right there where you are. And then what does he do to encourage them to stay where they are? Huh?
I mean, yeah, he tells them what will happen if they do stay and if they don't stay.
Okay, so he gives them the consequences or what's going to happen, the result of either action. He says, if you do what I tell you to do, and you'll just stay there, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to build you up. I'm going to plant you so you'll be fruitful, and I'm going to protect you. He even said that he was going to cause this evil king Nebuchadnezzar. Look, historians tell us this guy was downright cruel. All right, he was an evil man, but God says, if you'll just stay there, I'm even going to make him have mercy on you. This evil king is going to have mercy on you if you'll just stay right there instead of running away. But what did he say would happen if they ran away to Egypt? Which is what they really had intended to do. They would die. How would they die? Do you remember some of the things he said about how they would die?
Sword by pestilence.
Yeah. Sword, pestilence, and famine. The very things that God had judged Judah and Israel with. The armies of Nebuchadnezzar. The famine that happened when they were besieged and they ran out of food. Pestilence. Anytime there's a group of people enclosed in a certain space for a long period of time, and if anybody gets a disease, everybody gets a disease. Alright? So they're saying, let's run away to Egypt, where we won't have to worry about the King Nebuchadnezzar and his armies. We won't have to worry about famine. We won't have to worry about sickness. We go there, everything's going to be good. And God says, if you go there, I'm just going to have it chase you all the way. It's going right behind you. So, okay, they've got a promise. Stay where you are, take care of you. Don't stay where you are, you're going to suffer the consequences that disobedience deserves. So now look down in chapter 43. Azariah, verse 2, chapter 43, verse 2. Azariah, the son of Hoshea, and Johanan, the son of Kareah, and all the insolent men said to Jeremiah, let's read this line together. You are telling a lie. What? You're telling a lie. The Lord our God did not send you to say, do not go to Egypt to live there. What? They said, but Baruch, the son of Neriah, has set you against us to deliver us into the hand of the Chaldeans, that they may kill us or take us into exile in Babylon. So Johanan, the son of Kareah, and all the commanders of the forces and all the people did not obey the voice of the Lord to remain in the land of Judah. What just happened? Why do you think they came to Jeremiah in the first place?
They wanted him to confirm what they already were thinking.
They wanted him to confirm what they already were thinking, but why Jeremiah?
He was credible because he had told them before what was going to happen.
Jeremiah has been around 30 or 40 years saying, this is what's going to happen. And it finally happened. They knew that he heard from God. They knew that when he spoke the words of God. And when they ask him to specifically give them an answer from God and he gives it, what did they say?
No, that's no thanks.
You're a liar. You are a liar. You're not telling us the truth. You've got false motives. Your friend has enticed you to say something that will cause us to be either taken prisoner or killed by the Chaldeans. That was another name for the Babylonians. All right. It said you did not have our best interests in mind. You are telling us a lie. Why did they think it was a lie? Why did they say it was a lie?
They didn't like it.
It wasn't what they wanted to hear. They didn't like it. How many times have we done that? Lord, what does he want me to do? What does he want me to do? Just tell me what you want me to do, Lord, and I will do it. And God says, I want you to do something hard. That's not you, God. Yeah, that must have not been God. I don't want to listen to that. I refuse to listen to that. God, come on. Now give me a clear word, Lord. Block out all the enemy's things that he's saying to me. These folks, same situation. They heard from God. They didn't like what they heard. They said it was a lie. And so they set out. The remnant that was left, they set out for Egypt. And they took Jeremiah and Baruch, his servant, with them. What do you think it was that caused them, besides it wasn't what they wanted, what was their great concern about why they would not listen to God's clear instructions and the encouragement of what would happen if they would simply obey? What was getting in the way?
They were afraid.
They were afraid. Do you remember what it said back in chapter 42, verse 11? It says, do not fear the king of Babylon. This is God. Do not fear the king of Babylon, of whom you are afraid. Do not fear him, declares the Lord, for I am with you to save you and to deliver you from his hand. Why does fear keep us from listening to God? Let's be honest. Everybody, all right, I'm just going to go ahead and generalize and say everybody. I don't know everybody's situation, but I know people and I know me. Everybody has disobeyed God at some point because of fear.
Afraid of change?
A fear of change? Yeah, but we don't know what to expect, right? Fear of the unexpected. What else? Why does fear keep us from obeying God?
Because we think we're God ourselves, we're own man, and it's like we're disobedient. Because we think we know everything, we have all the answers.
Okay. Because we think we know better than God. That's it. That's very true as well.
So all we can think about is the negative stuff that could happen rather than the positive stuff that will happen if we follow
Okay.
God.
We focus on the negative rather than the positive. Yes, and we talk about glass half full, glass half empty kind of people, but even those of us who are glass half full kind of people, oftentimes that fear can sneak in. What were you going to say, Cindy?
Fear of the unknown.
The unknown, yeah. Fear of the unknown.
I think it's also just, because, when there's fear, there's a lack of trust. Where there's a lot of trust, there's very little fear. And with trust, the issue is You know, for example, if I said, hey, can you give me $50? I swear to you tomorrow I'll give you 100. You know, there's two components to that. It's like, am I trustworthy enough that, you know, I'll give you that, and am I able to? Because if I don't have $100, it don't matter how much I care about Kenny to follow through my word, I can't give that to him. So with God, the issue is always, well, is he able to do what he said he is? And, you know, can he be trusted to do that? And I think the issue here is they're so afraid that they don't think God can protect them, and they don't think God has the power to protect them.
Great. That's it. I mean, what we talk about the fear of the unknown. These folks God had told them, this is what's going to happen. Two choices. One of two things is going to happen. But the real issue is exactly what Jonathan just said. In fact, you will see Jonathan read my notes. Fear is unbelief. Think about it. Your fear, my fear, it is unbelief. It is not trusting in God. Because they did not really believe, listen carefully, because this is just repeating what John said. They did not really believe that God cared enough to take care of them or was powerful enough to do what was best for them. That's what unbelief is. Either God doesn't care enough or is not powerful enough to do what is best for me. So, I'm afraid that God's not going to come through. And when I'm afraid that God's not going to come through, I have to take matters into my own hands, and I have to try to work it out the best way that I know how. And these folks said, it seems crazy to stay right here where we are as a sitting duck, as targets for Nebuchadnezzar. He doesn't have to chase us down. He knows right where we are. He can just send his army. They'll wipe us out for our rebellion, for the assassination of Gedaliah, even though we aren't personally responsible. We are done if we stay here. It only makes sense to go to Egypt, the next most powerful nation in the area. And they'll protect us, and we'll have everything that we want. It was all a matter of unbelief. We do the same thing. We know God. We know what He's done in the past. Oftentimes we know exactly what He wants us to do. But does He really care enough to do it the way that I want Him to do it? Is He really powerful enough to take care of it? Because I really think this would be what is best for me. So how do we, look, we all deal with that. How do we respond to God's Word without fear, without unbelief, so that we can obey Him? And though this was a very specific promise to them that if they stayed, that God was going to take care of them, build them up, cause them to flourish. He would give them mercy through King Nebuchadnezzar. That was very specific to them, but it's just one of many places where God has promised that He wants to be working for our good, even though it's hard. They were going to be under the rule of the evil king, yes, but even though it's hard, God says, trust me, I'm going to take care of you. And maybe the best verse, I was trying to think, what's one verse that we can look at that would encourage us when it comes to this battle with fear? And I look back to 1 John chapter 4. 1 John chapter 4, listen to what it says here in verses 18 and 19. Let's read it out loud. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. We love because He first loved us. Alright, so what does love have to do with fear? What does love do to fear? What does perfect love do to fear? Drives it away, casts it out, right? Go back to that verse before, please. No. Perfect love casts out all fear. One more time, please. There we go. I don't know what it was. That was weird. Okay. Fear has to do with punishment. I'm afraid of something bad that's going to happen to me, like we talked about a minute ago. And whoever fears has not been perfected in love. What does that mean? It means that I'm not really trusting that God is love and that He loves me enough to do what is best for me. Now think about the times, maybe just recently, maybe in the last week, where you have disobeyed God. Maybe you were afraid to do what you knew was right. Or because of fear, you would stop doing something because that's what you're used to, that's what you're comfortable with, and you were afraid of what it might be like if you stopped doing that, even though you know that it's not good for you. What is the reason it says that fear keeps us from obeying? We haven't, huh?
We haven't been perfected.
Have not been perfected in love. That word perfected means complete. It has the idea of being mature. Hasn't grown up enough to realize what love really is. And so in verse 19, it tells us something very basic. We love. The only reason we love at all is because He first loved us. I want to encourage, there's nobody in this room, nobody listening to my voice who doesn't know, has not heard, God loves you. But the question of whether we obey or disobey in our daily lives, often, if not always, comes down to the question, do I believe this verse right here? Do I really believe that the God who, just a few verses before this, it says, is love, loves me? Because if I believe that, how does that help me to obey? How does that help me to obey if I know and believe completely that the God who is love loves me completely?
You know He has your best interest at heart.
We know that He has our best interests at heart. So the people of Judah who fled to Egypt, they fled because they didn't really believe that God had their best interests at heart, that He cared enough about them, or that He was able to take care of them in the face of the armies of Babylon. So they go to Egypt. And when they get to Egypt, wouldn't you know it, they go right back to worshiping the false gods and the idols that they had been worshiping for generations. So the Lord sends a message to Jeremiah and says, cut it out. Come on. Do you not realize this is why you're here? You need to stop worshiping these false gods, these pagan gods. And in chapter 44, verse 15, listen to what they say. This is their response. Remember, they started by asking, God, what do you want us to do? We'll do whatever you tell us. Then they said, we're afraid. So listen to what God has said for us to do. We're going to do the opposite. Now, verse 15, listen to how it's progressed. Then all the men who knew that their wives had made offerings to other gods, and all the women who stood by, a great assembly, all the people who lived in Pathros in the land of Egypt, answered Jeremiah, as for the word that you have spoken to us in the name of the Lord, read that out loud together. We will not listen to you. Are you kidding me? Now they're not even questioning whether it's a lie or not a lie. They're just like, we're not going to listen. We are not going to listen to you. See how their hearts have gotten harder every step of the way? Verse 17, listen to what it says. But we will do everything that we have vowed, make offerings to the Queen of Heaven, and pour out drink offerings to her as we did, both we and our fathers, our kings, and our officials in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then we had plenty of food and prospered and saw no disaster. But since we left off making offerings to the Queen of Heaven and pouring out drink offerings to her, we have lacked everything and have been consumed by the sword and by famine. Are you kidding me? Did you hear what they just said? They say, nope, we're not going to listen anymore to you telling us not to go back and worship the other gods. Why weren't they going to listen? Why is it that they thought it was the best thing for them to do, to go back and worship the other gods? What did they say?
That's what they used to do.
It's what they used to do, what their family had been doing for generations. And what did they say about were the results of doing that? They said it worked. How did it work? What specifics did they say? Did they say
There were no
it?
disasters or famine.
They prospered. No disasters, no famine. Think about that. Think about what had been going on in the 2 years before this statement for these people. What had been going on in Jerusalem? It was besieged by Babylon. And why it was happening. They said things were better when they followed their ancestors' practices of worshiping the Queen of Heaven. Queen of Heaven was Ashtoreth, who was a Canaanite goddess, was kind of evolved from the Babylonian Ishtar goddess, was believed to be the root of the Greek goddess Aphrodite. So there was a lot of ritual prostitution. She was known as a moon goddess, and so they would make these cakes in the shape of a moon in honor of her and to worship her. And they said, we're going to stick with her because she took care of us. She took care of us better than the Lord does. And listen to Jeremiah's response in chapter 44, verse 20. Then Jeremiah said to all the people, men and women, all the people who had given him this answer. Verse 21. As for the offerings that you offered in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem, you and your fathers, your kings and your officials, and the people of the land, did not the Lord remember them? Did it not come into his mind? The Lord could no longer bear your evil deeds and the abominations that you committed. Therefore, your land has become a desolation and a waste and a curse without inhabitant as it is this day. It is because you made offerings and because you sinned against the Lord and did not obey the voice of the Lord or walk in his law and in his statutes and in his testimonies that this disaster has happened to you as at this day. Can you hear Jeremiah's frustration there? It's like, what are you talking about? It was better before. The destruction, the disaster, the famine, it was not because you quit worshiping the false gods. It wasn't because you quit worshiping the moon goddess Ashtoreth. It all happened because you and your forefathers were worshiping the moon goddess. It's because of all of your faithlessness to God that you're going through these difficult situations. So what's happening? Why would God's people vow to follow Ashtoreth rather than Yahweh? What do you think's at the heart of it? You think they had just forgotten about why all of the hardships came on them? Or did they just not want to remember and they chose to rebel against the Lord?
Chose to rebel.
They chose. The bottom line issue here is that they kept them from listening to the Lord in both the situations about staying or leaving, and about worshiping the Lord or worshiping Ashtoreth, the moon goddess. All comes down to unbelief. But when I say unbelief, sometimes it sounds like just a failure to do something. This wasn't like, oh, we tried and we failed. They chose not to believe. We are not going to listen to you anymore. We don't want to hear what you have to say. Because of their rebellion, you could say they misremembered what happened leading up to the disaster in Judah. Whatever the cause was, they chose not to believe. They chose to rebel. Now they found themselves in Egypt worshiping these other gods. And long story short is exactly what God said was going to happen, happened. Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, when he found out what happened, got angry, heard that they had fled to Egypt. He was on his way to Egypt when Jerusalem got in his way in the first place. So he said, now we're going all the way. And he went and took over Egypt, killed the people. There was no safety in what they thought would bring them safety. There was no pleasure there. They just died in a place that was not home. So now let's talk about this for us. How do we see unbelief affecting people's ability and willingness to listen to God today? What are some ways that unbelief keeps folks from listening and obey?
Well, I mean, I'm saying like, I mean, like have something like historical, like maybe your job or something like that, and people like they're just afraid because they feel they may not do well on it, and but God wants them, you know,
Okay.
the spirit of fear, you know. I mean,
Yeah,
take examples like, you know, His word says, you know, I will strengthen you, I'll be there for you, but you're afraid to go for it because it's like you don't have belief in yourself.
There's a fear of failure.
Yeah.
A fear of failure. Absolutely. I can definitely identify that's been an issue that I have battled in my own life. It's fear of failure. It paralyzes us.
I think it also stops us from facing, you know, basically who we are and what we are. And I mean, it all comes down to where it's centered. You know, even as I'm thinking about why would they make this decision and why would they do that, you know, how do I do that in my own life? Well, a lot of the times it comes down to, you know, if, for example, something I have to make a very hard decision, I avoid that hard decision, I make things worse. Because for me to make that hard decision, that forces me to recognize that I can't do this alone, or I don't have what it takes to do it, and that requires me to admit to my shortcomings. And I think that's difficult. So in the same way, I mean, here they are, well, we would have to admit that our past, our forefathers, they made mistakes. And that's the one thing they did. And it's, I mean, you even look at the story of Jesus, well, what did John do to prepare the way for our Lord and Savior? It was simply say, his message was just repent.
Yeah.
Admit to who you are. You fall short. That's where we start. And I think that's the big issue for non-belief is it's this stand I have to take to say, hey, I can't do this alone, or I fall short. I don't have what it takes to do this on my own strength. God, this path I have to walk because I need your help. And usually when you look at the hard decision, the easy decision, that's usually the litmus test. One requires you just to trust God, and one doesn't.
And I think both of you touched on something that's very important. Am I focusing on me, or am I focusing on God? And when it comes to dealing with fear in our lives, that is the very first issue that we have to deal with. To see God for who He is. To see ourselves for who we are. And recognize that, as Jonathan said, I have to choose not to depend on me, but to depend on Him. How do we do that more often? I think the first step is this, that we have to spend more time with Jesus.
It says cast your fears aside.
Yeah, you have to cast those fears aside. But He says, cast them on me. Literally, cast your cares upon the Lord because He cares for you. There goes back to that idea of we have to trust that He cares for us. How can I become more confident in the fact that God cares for me? By spending time with Him and seeing and being reminded of how He cares for me. There's a story in Acts chapter 4 that tells us about the apostles Peter and John, and they had gone to the temple that had been rebuilt by Herod the Great about 500 years after it was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar's crew, the Babylonians. And so they're on their way to the temple for a time of prayer, and there's a man there that's there at the same gate every day begging for money. He's lame, he can't walk, and he's asking them for money, and they say, hey, we don't have any money, but what we do have, we will give to you in the name of Jesus Christ. Stand up and walk. And the guy gets up and starts dancing and goes praising the Lord into the temple. And everybody knows who he is and everybody sees it. And so people come rushing to Peter and John asking, what's going on here? How are you doing this? They preached in the name of Jesus, shared the gospel with the people. And of course, the religious leaders didn't like that, so they sent the guards to arrest them and bring them before this group of men who were religious / political leaders. And they asked them what was going on. And again, Peter just gives them the gospel. Look, Jesus, the Son of God, came down here. You nailed him to a cross. God the Father raised him from the dead, and he's the only way that any of us are ever going to get to heaven. It's the only way any of us are going to get saved. And then now listen, though, to what it said about was the reaction of these religious leaders who were so against the gospel of Jesus. In Acts 4:13, look what it says here. Now, when they saw the boldness of Peter and John, and perceived that they were uneducated common men, they were astonished. And they what? Recognized that they had been with who? Jesus. Jesus. Now think about this. Were they afraid? What was the descriptive word there?
Bold.
Boldness. That's like an opposite of fear, right? When they saw the boldness of Peter and John, they weren't educated. They didn't have a position in the community. They were just common folk like everybody else. And yet they had this boldness that astonished these religious and wealthy government and church leaders. And they recognized the cause of it was because they'd been with Jesus. If you and I are ever going to overcome the fear in our lives and be faithful to God on a more regular basis, we have to spend time with Jesus. And then when people say, what has gotten into them? Hopefully they will have heard from us because of our boldness. Oh, it must be that Jesus that I hear him talking about. That Jesus that she has mentioned to me at times when we have had discussions. And they recognize there's something about Jesus that changed this person's life and took out the fear and replaced it with boldness. Where is it that you're afraid to obey God? May I challenge you to spend more time with him, reading his word. Look, we're reading through Scripture, and there are times it's easy to get bogged down and say, I'll put that off. But the more you read, the more you get to know the God of creation, the more that you get to see how much he cares for you. You see, yes, that he brings judgment on his people when they disobey him, but he always has mercy. He always desires to reconcile. And by spending time with him, which can only happen because of his mercy and his grace, we get to know him better. We realize that he, number one, cares, and number two, he is powerful enough to do what is best for you. Spend time with Jesus. And then real quickly, when it comes to this idea of being obedient, I know most of us in this room, we've been Christ followers for a while, okay? So maybe there's been some time we've done this, but I want to encourage you to go back to the basics, and that is to start small and build up. Start small and build up. What do you mean, David, by that? Real quickly, there's a story Jesus told that was about a man who was a wealthy man going on a trip, and he had 3 servants, 3 of his employees, and he gave each of them a varying amount of money, what was called talents in their days. Now, 1 talent was equal to about a day's wages for a common worker. And we see that the first 2, he gave talents. The second one just gave 2 talents. It was just like 2 days' wages worth of money. And he says, I want you to do business with this until I come back. And when he came back, he finds out that the guy that he gave 2 talents had multiplied that into 4, just by diligent effort, just by being faithful to do his job, to do what he was supposed to do. And I want you to listen to what Jesus said that the boss said to the employee. In Matthew chapter 25, verse 23. He said, his master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a what? Little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. You say, David, what does that mean? It means that if we are faithful to God in little things, that we're going to grow in our understanding of who He is. We're going to grow in our understanding that if I obey Him in this, then I can trust Him in that. If I can trust Him in that, I can trust Him in this bigger thing. If I can trust Him in this bigger thing, there's nothing that God tells me to do that I cannot do with His power for His glory. So I get rid of fear by spending time with Him and realizing how much He loves me. And then by trusting Him enough to obey Him in the little bitty things, faithfully, regularly, which encourages me to trust Him in bigger things and bigger things and bigger things. And in so doing, as our faith grows, fear dwindles. As our understanding of His love for us increases, the fear that paralyzes us and keeps us from following God diminishes. It may never completely live your life in this world, but it won't hold you as its slave. So let's be honest, for a lot of us, that's where it is right now. We are enslaved to our fear of the opinions of others, our fear of the rejection of others, our fear of the failure if we try something and it doesn't work out the way that we think it should. The only two answers that I see are that we get to know the God who is love better through Jesus, and that we practice, obey in faith, and learn and experience how faithful He can be. What else maybe has God said to some of you today about dealing with listening to God? Not just hearing it, but actually acting in faith.
I think I've just been thinking about how much I don't always recognize the spiritual side of things. Like I always think, oh, it's just me and my brain, and but just recognizing there is an enemy that I was even thinking it kind of all goes back to Genesis and that first sin where it's like He told, He's the one that came and caused Adam to question.
Yeah.
Which kind of caused them to doubt, and then they had a choice, do I trust God or do I trust myself? And I feel like our questions always go back to, well, God or me? And so often we choose ourselves, but I think there's, just that spiritual side of there is someone who doesn't want us to trust God.
Absolutely.
And, and that's, once He gets us to question, it's that's all He needs to do, and our own doubt and fear can come in through that, I know people talk about Satan or I don't know how it all works, but they look for that kind of chink in your armor, and that's where they just have to put a question in there, and then your imagination just takes over. And so often I find myself, it's I'm doubting, I'm questioning, I'm trusting myself, and it's a lot of that is a practical side, but also recognizing it's a spiritual battle also. And I think for me that helps me be okay, wait a second. If there's anything telling me God is not trustworthy, He doesn't care, it's Satan is called the accuser.
That's Genesis all over.
Yeah,
Garden of Eden all over.
Yeah. So I think just for me recognizing it's not just this, me thing, it's there's a spiritual side. And for me it's almost as soon as I recognize, oh, there's someone who wants me to think these things and is trying to get between me and God, it's easier for me to be oh, now I recognize where those questions are coming from, and I can battle them from a different standpoint.
That's it is a spiritual battle. And it's not just all an internal thing. It says, and I think it was mentioned a few moments ago about the spirit of fear. The Bible says there is a spirit of fear. We're not talking about a lot of people in our country right now celebrating the spirit of patriotism that is some abstract thing. He was talking about a literal person, spirit of fear that attacks us with those doubts and questions. Is God really good? Did God really say this? And does God really have your best interests at heart? Maybe you should forget about that. Because who knows what might happen. Anybody else? Thank you, Sarah. That was great.
Okay.
All right, go for it.
Just you mentioned like hearts being hardened, and it was like 2 weeks ago. Like Jonathan's so great, and when he was just like, okay, you're acting crazy. Didn't say I was crazy, just acting crazy because he's
A wise man.
Yes, and he's like, you need to go do quiet times. Like I'll get up early so that you can go do that. And so I did, and it was wonderful. And I was reading in Hebrews, and it quoted like, back to something else I can't remember, but it was saying, if today you hear the voice of the Lord, don't harden your heart. And that is like, I think it's like, that's why God was like, Jonathan, like, you say this to her, and we're going to get her here, and I'm going to tell her to read Hebrews, because this is what she needs to hear. And a lot of times I don't recognize that my heart is hardened, or like, like it's times like, I know what God would like me to do, and I'm just like, no.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to admit, like, my heart is hard in that area, not like, oh no, I've just been hurt, or I've just been, like, things are just not right. It's like, no, my heart is hardened, and that's what I need to be aware of.
Absolutely. Jonathan's over there with a big smile.
For the record, I said you're acting like someone who acts great. I added
Like
the
5
extra
generations
layer.
removed from the crazy calling her crazy.
You don't call a woman crazy, you'll see crazy.
You must be crazy if you call your wife crazy, right? Oh, goodness. That's a completely different spirit. Oh, goodness. All right, anybody else? This battle with fear that is a spiritual battle, it's sometimes seems like it's hopeless. There's no way to win it. But there is a way to win it, and that way has been made available to us because of one thing. Because Jesus, by his death on the cross, has conquered sin. Conquered death, our greatest fear. Conquered hell. Because he's risen from the dead, he offers that victory to each one of us who would trust in him. So today, as we participate and celebrate what he's done for us through the Lord's Supper, through communion, I encourage you to I want us to take just a moment. And I want us to, each of us individually, to talk to God about where you are. Maybe there's some issues with fear in your life and unbelief in your life where you've been struggling, and you need just to admit that to God. God, I sin. That's sin. My attitude sin, the practices I've been doing. You've been telling me to go this way, and I've gone this way. You told me to stay, and I left. Whatever it is, God is merciful, and he says, if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just. Forgive us of our sins. Cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And that's a good starting point for us being able to connect with him more closely so that we get to know him better, realize how much he loves us, and follow and obey him, and see that he's faithful when we trust him enough to obey.